This is exactly how the YouTube algorithm works right now, according to white papers released by YouTube themselves. Yeah, that's what I thought. So let's simplify and break all of this down, because once you actually understand how the algorithm works and how the ecosystem your videos are operating within work, it's going to allow you to basically reverse engineer success and basically stop sucking on YouTube. So by the end of this video, my goal is to teach you the exact levers that you actually need to pull to basically guarantee that you'll get more views, because the YouTube algorithm literally works to give you more views when you pull those levers. All right, let's start off with YouTube's goal. YouTube is a business. And in general, its business objectives are to get viewers to spend as much time as possible on YouTube. The more time people spend on YouTube, the more ads they tend to consume or encounter, and that results in YouTube making more money. The reason I bring this up is because, yes, the brands are in porn. Yes, the creators are in porn. Without those two components, the whole ecosystem breaks. But the viewers are the lifeblood of the entire system. And so that's where YouTube starts, and that's where YouTube focuses. And it's an important distinction to make, because the algorithm isn't just a promotional robot that's designed to promote your videos and help you grow your channel. Rather, it's designed to follow each individual viewer and recommend content to them that will appeal to them, engage them, and satisfy them. Because when it can do that, it's going to result in those viewers spending more time on the platform, which makes YouTube more money. And we'll talk more in depth about those specific three categories in a second, because they're pretty important. But before we do move on, I want you to make a commitment to stop blaming the algorithm when your videos flops. Because yes, blaming your epic failures on an ambiguous, all-powerful force, it might be fun. But the truth is that, assuming you're making it through the bare minimum basic filters that we're going to talk about in this video, if your videos aren't performing, it's not because the algorithm doesn't like them. It's because the viewers don't like them. And the algorithm is just detecting the viewers' reactions to your videos and then sending it to less and less people. So let's dive into exactly how the algorithm actually works. And let's start with the basics. Now, the first thing you need to remember before we start even explaining this flowchart is that the algorithm analyzes and caters to each individual viewer on a case-by-case basis. And this is why your YouTube homepage probably looks a lot different and features very different videos to, say, your mum's YouTube homepage. Or at least I sure hope it does. So to help this explanation make more sense, I want to introduce you to Larry, our example guy. Larry meet viewers, viewers meet Larry.
Hi.
Now onto the flowchart. The first step in this flowchart provided to us by YouTube is the corpus. The corpus is basically a giant bucket that contains every single video on YouTube that Larry could technically watch. But the algorithm knows, obviously, that even though it has access to every single video on YouTube, and even though that Larry could technically watch every single video on YouTube, Larry actually doesn't care very much about Mongolian throat singing videos, people stuffing their faces for views, Bob the Builder Jungle Edition videos. In fact, Larry actually doesn't care about the vast majority of content on YouTube. And so the first thing the algorithm is designed to do is to go through what's called a candidate generation process. What it does is it tries to get rid of all of the videos that it thinks Larry would not be interested in. And this is called candidate generation because by the end of this process, YouTube's goal is to have millions of candidate videos that it could potentially show to Larry that Larry might potentially be interested in watching. So how does YouTube do this? How does it actually figure out what videos might be good candidates for Larry and what videos aren't? Well, there are kind of two stages to this. First, YouTube needs to actually distinguish what videos it has in its corpus, because if YouTube doesn't actually know anything about the videos that it has access to, then it's not going to know how to distinguish between them. So what YouTube does is it learns as much as it can about every single video that it has in its corpus so it can distinguish between them, know what each video is about, and have a pretty good idea of then which viewer to send it to. Now, beyond watch history, audience signals, and collaborative filtering, which are things we'll talk about in a moment because they're really important, YouTube uses the following things to learn about what the videos that it actually has in its corpus. The first is metadata, and this is all of the settings that you actually add to your videos when you upload them. And most notably, the most important metadata that YouTube looks at are your title and your description. More specifically, what keywords your title and description actually contain within them, but also how they're actually written. And that leads us to the next point, which is natural language AI. YouTube has an AI system that can not only transcribe what is said in your videos and in your metadata, but it actually can understand the meanings behind the words and phrases that are being said beyond just the objective keywords themselves. It can understand the sentiment of what's being said, as well as pick out specific topics that are being talked about to get a better idea of what's going on in your video. And beyond the metadata, YouTube actually transcribes your entire video. So everything you say in your video, it automatically transcribes it. And then it runs it through this natural language AI process to not only be able to find keywords, but figure out the overall meaning and sentiment behind what's being said. On top of that, YouTube uses a thing called Vision AI, which is another AI that can automatically figure out exactly what is in your YouTube thumbnail. It can identify people, it can identify objects, sometimes it can identify who the people are, it can identify their expressions, it can identify how much clothing they've got on, it can identify whether there are text in the thumbnails and then transcribe that text, and a whole lot more. And then on top of that, YouTube also uses another AI system called Video AI, and that can actually break down your videos frame by frame and kind of do what Vision AI does. It analyzes each individual frame within your video to figure out what objects are in there, to understand what's going on visually. So basically, long story short, YouTube can not only read your metadata, but it can actually understand what's being said in your videos in terms of what keywords are being mentioned, but also can understand the sentiment and the meaning behind what's being talked about. And it can also actually watch your videos and break them down frame by frame and figure out what's actually in them. I'm not sure how often YouTube uses all of these different systems for every single video. I don't know if it actually analyzes every single frame of every single video, because that would be a lot of data. And even YouTube themselves have written white papers discussing about like how they actually have trouble processing all of the data they have because there's just so many videos. But what we do know for sure is that YouTube has access to all of these things to use to some extent. And I share this information with you because one, I mean, you're here watching a video about how the algorithm works. So what did you expect to hear? But two, it shows you that YouTube actually knows a lot about your videos, far more about your videos than you probably thought it did. And so even if your video has 0 views and not a scrap of metadata, YouTube can use all of its AI and get a pretty good idea of what your video is about. YouTube knows what the videos in its corpus are actually about. Then, based on what it knows about the videos, YouTube then tries to select videos that it thinks would be good candidates for the specific viewer it's catering to. So in this case, YouTube's going to try and figure out what all the different videos are and then pick out the ones that are going to be good candidates to suggest to Larry based on what it knows about Larry. So how does YouTube actually find candidates for Larry? Well, firstly, it can look at Larry's search history. Based on what Larry's actually searched for and typed into YouTube, it can get an idea of Larry's intent and what Larry's current interests are and the kind of content that Larry is currently looking for. YouTube can also analyze demographic and contextual information. So some examples of what demographic or contextual information would be. Demographics could be things like age, gender, language. So language is important. For example, if Larry's an English speaker from the US, the algorithm is probably going to filter out all videos that are primarily spoken in German, right? Because an English speaker is probably not going to watch a video in German. It can also look at things like seasonality and trends. For example, the algorithm might be less likely to promote a video to Larry in July if that video is all about Christmas. However, if it's in December, it might be more likely to promote that video to Larry because of the seasonality and the trend. It also can look at things like location. If it knows that Larry is based in the US, it's going to show NFL videos when Larry types football into YouTube search, as opposed to if Larry was in the UK, where when Larry types football into the search engine, it might show videos of, real football, soccer, like people playing ball with their feet. And also it can even go even deeper than that and look at things like time and devices. And the reason why this is valuable to the algorithm is because if Larry, say, watches work-related educational videos on his desktop device between 9 to 5, but then he watches entertainment-related videos on his phone between 8 to 10 p.m., the YouTube algorithm is going to have a look at that contextual information based on when Larry's on YouTube and figure out what styles of videos would be the best candidates for Larry at this particular time. That's demographics and contextual information, but the YouTube algorithm also uses something called audience signals history. So what the algorithm will do is it's actually going to go back and it's going to look at Larry's history, what videos he's viewed in the past, and beyond just what videos he's viewed, it's going to analyze how he's actually interacted with those videos. It's going to look at things like what videos has he clicked on, which videos does he never click on, what videos has he shared, what videos has he watched all the way to the end, or what videos did he leave very quickly on. And all of these different signals will help the algorithm get an idea of what videos Larry likes and what videos Larry doesn't. Now we'll talk a bit more about audience signals and the specific audience signals that are most important in a second, but the next thing I wanted to talk about is collaborative filtering. See, the algorithm not only looks looks at Larry's watch history, but can look at the watch history of people who watch similar videos to Larry and give similar audience signals to Larry. So for example, let's say that Larry clicks on and watches 3 funny cat videos all the way to the end. And let's say for the sake of this example, he also leaves a like on all 3 of those videos and a comment on all 3 of those videos, like a true legend. Now, let's say that YouTube notices Larry's behavior, and YouTube also notices that Tom and Dave, 2 other viewers, also watched those exact same 3 funny cat videos all the way to the end, and Tom and Dave also liked all 3 of those videos, and Tom and Dave also commented on all 3 of those videos. Well, at that point, the algorithm is going to be like, Tom and Dave are exhibiting very similar behavior to Larry. So maybe if we figure out what videos Tom and Dave have both watched all the way to the end, liked and commented on, we'll promote them to Larry as well, because Larry might probably like them too, because they seem to all have very similar viewing habits. And so that's how collaborative filtering works. And it's one of the most important things that YouTube actually looks at to find these good video candidates for Larry. So the candidate generation process is done after all of this, right? Well, not exactly. There's actually a few other filters that candidates need to pass through in order to make the final cut for Larry. The first main one would be the policy layer. So the policy layer basically makes sure that you're actually abiding by YouTube's policies, and YouTube tries to eliminate low quality content as so deemed by YouTube. And low quality content might be things like conspiracies, or what YouTube deems as conspiracies, misinformation, or what YouTube deems as misinformation. So for example, if there's a serious video about why the earth is flat, that would fall into this potential category of low quality content. And so if YouTube thinks your content is low quality or misinformation, it's going to intentionally filter it out and show it to far less people if showing to people at all. I think there are probably more filters in this stage beyond just the policy generation filter. And I think there are probably other nuances that YouTube doesn't share with us. But for the sake of not going down that nerdy rabbit hole, let's move on to the next step in this process, and that is the ranking filter. So after the candidate generation, YouTube now has a pool of hundreds of videos that it thinks Larry will like. However, now what it's going to do is try and pinpoint and rank exactly what videos Larry will like the most. In other words, all the videos that make it to this point, they've all got a participation award, but YouTube is still trying to structure them and find the ones that are going to be the real winners. So because there are obviously a limited number of spaces on Larry's homepage and Larry's recommended bar, in Larry's search results page, it doesn't want to just randomly populate those home pages, recommended pages, search results with just random videos that made the cut. It's going to try and calculate which videos will be the most satisfying, which videos will be the most likely to keep Larry on the platform, and it's going to prioritize showing those ones to Larry first. So how does YouTube rank the videos it now has? Firstly, it's going to use Larry's information. So all this stuff we talked about earlier, contextual information, demographics, collaborative filtering, historical signals, except now instead of just looking at them and being like, hey, do you meet this criteria? It's going to be like, which of these videos meets these criteria the best or the most? The next thing it also can look at is filters. So sometimes there's fringe content. So there might be content that YouTube might deem to be low quality and it gets rid of, and then content that it deems to be quality that it keeps, but then there could be some in-between content that it's not 100% sure about. And if it's not sure, it might promote that content a little bit less or bring it down in the hierarchy below videos that pass through these filters with flying colors. And the other thing it looks at are audience signals from previous viewers of those videos. So it's going to look at these videos that it has in its candidate generation, and it's going to look at which ones are getting the strongest and most positive audience signals. So which videos are getting the highest percentage of people to click, which videos are getting the most people to watch, which videos are getting the most people to like, to comment, etc., etc. Again, we'll dive more into audience signals and which ones are the most important in a second. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is there's actually a process in this stage of the ranking called the DDP optimizer. And this is where, before it pushes out these videos to Larry's recommended page, it tries to make the recommendations a little bit more diverse. YouTube doesn't want Larry to feel like he's getting pigeonholed. They don't want Larry to feel like he can only come to YouTube for a certain type of content. They want it to feel like there are a broad array of random different videos that he could explore and discover. And so what it does is it will give spaces on Larry's recommended or homepage or whatever to videos that might not necessarily have made it to like the top spots in this ranking process, but that Larry has shown some interest in maybe a long time ago in the past, just to make Larry's recommendations feel a little bit more diverse. So for example, if Larry had been sent a random funny cat video by his mum 3 years ago, YouTube might look at that and go, well, back then Larry really enjoyed this random funny cat video, and even though nowadays he doesn't seem to be be watching funny cat videos anymore, we'll maybe just chuck a couple in there just to see how they go. So that's DPP Optimizer can do. And also the DPP Optimizer, once YouTube's got its rank order of what it thinks will be the best videos to the worst videos for Larry, it also tries to order them in a way that is going to promote the videos in the best way possible. So instead of simply ranking them from 1 to 10, so for example, if you type in how to grow your YouTube channel and hit enter, YouTube's not going to rank those videos in order of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's actually going to organize those videos in a way that it thinks is going to be most likely for you to find the videos that you most want to watch. So that might be, for example, it might put the number 1 video at the number 1 spot, but then it might have the number 3 video at the number 2 spot, and then the number 2 video at the number 3 spot, because maybe YouTube thinks that the 3rd spot on the search results page is more likely to get a click than the 2nd spot, and so it's going to put the 2nd video there. What the kind of a bit complicated, but I hope that makes sense. So in general, this is basically how the whole YouTube algorithm works. Now I know this is a lot, so feel free to rewatch this segment if you feel like you need to. But now the question is, how can you use this knowledge you've just gained about how the algorithm works to actually influence the algorithm and get more views and subscribers on your channel? Well, granted, not all areas of YouTube use the exact same algorithm, as I mentioned earlier, and there are different algorithms with different nuances. So for example, when Larry's using YouTube search, the algorithm is going to be a little bit more reliant on SEO and keywords of the video to make sure that the video is relevant to the search term that Larry's actually talking about. But in general, again, this is all you need to know about how the algorithm works, or all you probably want to know. But the important bit is, how do you actually make sure when the algorithm is going through this process, your videos get selected as candidates, your videos pass through the filters, and your videos then get ranked highly in the ranking section so that they actually get promoted to ideal viewers like Larry. The biggest lever beyond those things that you can pull to influence whether your video gets selected as a candidate and ranked for the right viewers by the algorithm is whether the viewers who come in contact with your videos send positive audience signals to the algorithm. So for example, if Larry enjoys your videos, and he will consciously or unconsciously send the algorithm positive signals that will show how thoroughly he's been satisfied by your video. And when YouTube receives these positive audience signals from Larry, it's going to be more likely that Larry will get recommended similar videos from that channel or related channel in the future. Potentially even more importantly, the algorithm sees that Larry is enjoying your videos. It's going to be more likely to promote your videos to other people who have similar viewing habits to Larry. Remember, we talked about collaborative filtering earlier. That's the real goal here. This is how you can massively scale your videos. So these audience signals, as you can see, the ways that YouTube figures out whether or not Larry's actually enjoying a video are incredibly important. So let's talk about audience signals a little bit. What exactly are they and which ones are the most important? So there are a ton of audience signals, as we talked about, but by far the most important ones can be broken down into 3 main buckets. The first one is appeal, second bucket is engagement, and the third bucket is satisfaction. Appeal is what videos the viewers, aka Larry, clicked on. So if Larry clicks on a video, it's sending a signal to YouTube that, hey, Larry is interested in this type of video. He doesn't just like the title and thumbnail, but he actually likes the video idea. At least he thinks he'll like the video idea at this stage, because if he didn't, he wouldn't be clicking on it. And the same goes the other way around. If Larry doesn't like a video or isn't interested in a particular type of video, he's not going to click on it. And that's going to send a signal to YouTube, and it's going to be like, all right, let's not send more of these videos to Larry or people like Larry, because clearly they're not interested in. So the appeal of your videos can be measured through your analytics as your click-through rate. If you just need an objective target to aim for, if you just want something, I would be trying to optimize your title and thumbnail roughly to that 10% mark. This is very relative. And as you're probably aware, your click-through rate comes down to how good your title is, how enticing your thumbnail is, and how good your actual video idea is. Because again, if you have a good title and thumbnail, but the actual idea, the whole premise of the content is not something people would be interested in, then they're not going to click anyway. But I want you to remember that the ranking process is relevant to the competition. The algorithm ranks the candidates based on what candidates it has. So for example, if your video has a 30% click-through rate, that might sound to be objectively great, but if all of the other candidates in the ranking filter have 40% click-through rates, then all of a sudden your video is going to be pushed all the way down the bottom of that list. And also you have to bear in mind that there's statistical significance. Like if you've got 2 views and you've got a 50% click-through rate, that just means that there's been 2 people see your video and 1 person's clicked. The person was probably you. So it's not statistically significant. It is relative. One of my most popular videos ever currently has a 3% click-through rate. And I know obviously as the video grows, the click-through rate goes down, but still that's a pretty low click-through rate, it sounds like. All right, let's talk about the next bucket, engagement. So engagement is what they watched and what they didn't. So if Larry clicks on a video, that's great. But if he leaves in the first 5 seconds, then clearly that video didn't deliver on the expectations Larry had for it. And so the algorithm is going to look at that, and you can measure the engagement by using your analytics again and using your average percentage viewed and your average view duration. In general, whether or not you're going to send the algorithm positive engagement audience signals is going to be whether or not you're really able to grab people and reassure them that you're going to deliver on the promise of the title and thumbnail and keep it engaging enough that they want to watch. And then secondly, once you've hooked them in, you actually need to continue to deliver on that promise and continue to deliver super engaging, entertaining content throughout the entire video, or they're going to leave. So again, it's relative, but some benchmarks that you can look at. This is specifically for average percentage view in your analytics if you want to judge roughly how your videos are comparing. You can see here, I've got this graph and the bottom is minutes, the left vertical is percentage watched. So if you have a 3-minute video, on average, most videos at 3 minutes have a 62% average percentage viewed, whereas the top 10% of videos have an 82% average percentage viewed. 6 minutes, 50% is the average percentage viewed, whereas the top 10% of videos on average get a 71% average percentage viewed, and you kind of get the idea. I mean, you can read the remainder of this graph. Again, it's relative, remember that. But if you want some objective, rough ballpark numbers to aim for, there you go. But we've talked about appeal and engagement, getting people to click and actually getting them to watch. And those 2 things will send super positive signals to the YouTube algorithm if you can get your viewers to do that. However, there's one last bucket, and that is satisfaction. Because not all watch time is actually created equal. Even if someone watches your video all the way to the end, they might not actually have enjoyed their time watching that video as much as they could have. And so YouTube actually makes a distinction between what it calls valued watch time and regular watch time. And that's where the satisfaction element of this whole equation comes in. So satisfaction is what they actually liked, what they disliked, what they came back for more of, what they watched more of, survey responses and stuff like that. YouTube's trying to figure out, all right, so they clicked on this video, and even if they watched this video all the way to the end, but are they actually satisfied with this video? Are they glad they made that decision? Are they glad they stuck to it? Because if not, YouTube's still going to try and avoid promoting more of those videos to them in the future. So how does YouTube actually look at whether or not a viewer was satisfied? What audience signals does it pay most attention to when gauging whether or not Larry was satisfied by the video he just watched? Well, it's going to look at whether he liked the video. It's going to look at what Larry came back and watched more of, because if he watched one video all the way to the end and then he clicked on another video from the exact same creator that is very similar to that first video he watched all the way to the end, that's a very strong signal that Larry was glad with his decision to watch that video. It's going to look at what they come back from more of. So in different sessions, if maybe they watch one of your videos but then they have to go somewhere or they go to sleep or whatever, so they leave YouTube, but then next time they come back to YouTube, they come straight back to your videos and continue watching them. That's going to be a very positive signal. And viewer survey responses. I haven't seen as many of these in a while, but when you watch a video, sometimes you'll receive a survey that will ask you to rate how good you thought that video actually was. And those surveys are actually super important, because if you give that creator a really high score, it's going to result in YouTube thinking that more and more people have been satisfied by that video. Whereas if you give the video a low score, YouTube's going to assume that you weren't satisfied very much by that video. And you might be wondering, well, how does surveys actually work? Because I hardly ever see them and I hardly ever get them. And that's true. But YouTube actually uses a predictive AI model. So let's say, again, we talked about Tom and Dave and Larry earlier in this video, how they're all similar, how they all had very similar viewing habits. If Larry clicks on a video, likes it and comments on it, and then at the end of that video, he gets a survey and he rates the video a 5 out of 5 stars. And then Tom and Dave also click on that video, watch the video all the way to the end and like it, YouTube might not send them a survey. In fact, it probably won't send them a survey, because it's going to be like, well, Larry just did the exact same things these guys did, and this is what rating Larry gave on the survey. Tom and Dave are probably going to give the exact same rating. We're just going to assume they're going to give the exact same rating, and so we're not going to show them a survey. And that's kind of how it tries to predict what the survey responses will actually be. Again, it's more than just watching and clicking and liking. There are multiple different factors, but that's roughly how YouTube actually predicts survey responses. Let's look at some other things that you can look at to get a gauge of whether or not your audience are being satisfied. To me, the first thing that I would pay attention to to would be returning viewers. So you've got a returning viewers analytic on your channel. And if we talked about this earlier, but if people are coming back to your videos and watching more of them, that's one of the strongest signs that you're obviously doing a very good job because you haven't turned them off your content. The other thing is clicks to subscribe. Again, subscribers in and of themselves aren't that important because it's more important if a viewer actually watches your content, they're going to be more likely to get that content recommended to them by the algorithm than if they were to just simply subscribe. However, a subscribe is a show of intent. It shows that if you click that subscribe button, it shows that that creator obviously satisfied you enough that you want to subscribe and see more of them. Then there are likes. If you like a video, then obviously you thought it was good. If you commented on a video, maybe it's a mean comment, maybe it's an angry comment, but at the very least, it got you engaged enough to feel like you need to take the time out of your day to leave a comment. And there's also the end screen click-through rate. So similar to returning viewers, when you recommend your current viewers to watch more of your videos in your end screens, how many of them take you up on that recommendation? If it's a large percentage of them, it means they probably enjoyed your content. If it's a small percentage of them, then they're probably regretting having watched your content all the way to the end and they're off to watch another video. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any benchmarks for these things as of yet. I am planning on doing some studies into that. So you're just gonna have to look at what your other videos are getting and just continue to try and improve your benchmarks time and time again as you continue creating your videos. Obviously, again, there are a ton of different audience signals, but overall, these are the most important ones. If you can really nail these things, it's basically guaranteed that you'll get more views because the algorithm is literally designed to promote videos that nail these things. And when your video does nail these things, this is how it's going to grow. So the algorithm's going to start off by promoting you to a very small amount of people, a small audience. If it sees positive audience signals, it's going to go, cool. It's going to start promoting you to larger audiences and see whether or not you get positive audience signals there. And let's say you do. Let's say your video does. Well, the algorithm's like, great, people are liking this video. I'm going to continue promoting it. And it continues promoting it and branching out for more and more audiences until you get to the point where the algorithm tries to promote your video to more people, but those more people don't resonate with your content or they don't click on it. They don't watch it. Whatever it is, they send the algorithm negative signals when they interact with your content. And it's at that point that the algorithm will stop promoting your video. So outside of just these basic things like adding metadata and making sure you comply with policies, your job as a creator, if you want to work with the algorithm and get it to promote your videos, are to get them to click on your videos. You need to get them to actually watch your videos. You need to get them to actually continue watching your videos once they click on and start watching them. And you need to get them to come back for more and continue watching more of your videos because that's going to show that they were satisfied. And if you want to dive deeper on how to get your audience to do these things, how to get your audience to click, how to keep them watching, how to get them to come back for more, and in what order you should focus on executing those things, I want to encourage you to watch this next video where I'm going to walk you through my process of exactly how I go about trying to achieve those things, satisfying viewers and growing your gaming channel. So click it now and I'll see you there.